Good evening, Professor Vargas. My name is Reyna Bermudez, and I'm going to talk about my research. But first, I would like to start by presenting the agenda with the content that will be presenting on this presentation. First, I will start with the research context, which involve everything that is related, all the aspects that will be taken into account on this research, and also the setting in which the research took place. Then I will move to the research topics and objective, general and specific objective as well. Then I will go with the literature review, where I will talk about different theories that have to be related with the topic chosen. After that, I will go with the methodology, where I will talk a little bit about the participants that I have for the instruments that are applied for the research in order to have the findings, in which I will explain a little bit about the analysis that I did based on the results. And finally, I will talk about the conclusions and the recommendations as well. To start with the context, to the research context, I would like to start by saying a phrase that really caught my attention, which says, "I can express myself in somehow by speaking with my English teacher in class. But when I speak to real people, I can't express my ideas. I try to translate them and I don't find the correct word." This phrase is very interesting, since that some of the teachers once have heard about that phrases, or you or me as students once said when we were learning a language, and also by when we were practicing the speaking in the classroom, maybe we don't really feel like prepared for the real world. So according to an article by Porter, he expresses that English is always the first choice of a foreign language in most other countries of the world, and due to this fact, the position of the language of English have been a global lingua franca. For instance, one of the main concerns in the EFL classrooms is to enable students' speaking skill. For this reason, it is necessary to implement different strategies that in order to develop the speaking skill, uh, making the student feel like comfortable using the language more than naturally in our oral communication, and even like unconsciously. For this reason, this research is trying to contribute to the educational field, since it will analyze the strategies that are appropriate to develop the speaking skill in beginners students. The setting that was chosen to carry out this research was the Global Team Program, which is a program at Centro Cultural Nicaragüense Norteamericano. Moreover, it shows information that is meaningful to support the idea that speaking is better developed when it is thought through up-to-date or modern teaching strategies that are student-centered, instead of the traditional strategy that come from methods such as let's say, reading a text, or having some comprehension question asked and answered literally by oral, which is based on the grammar translation method, which is a very traditional method, or guided conversation where teacher asks questions on the text and students answer using full sentences following a structured model that is based on the direct method, or let's say memorizing dialogues where pronunciation is emphasized by repeating from the teacher, which is basically the autolingual method. So this research is trying not to use too much those typical methods or traditional method. This research is trying to find out or analyze the different strategies that are kind of modern. One of the main necessities in the learning of a foreign language is the development of the four skills, which are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. But in some classrooms, and specifically in the institution context chosen, those skills sometimes are not developed enough due to a set of factors. According to one author, Akbari, yes, Akbari expresses that a problem in learning English is the absence of effective and efficient teaching system throughout academic education, in which learning English is viewed as memorizing a list of words and a set of grammatical rules. So, more than producing the language by expressing feeling or ideas. Moreover, let's say that nowadays students have lack of many key factors that support them, such as motivational encouragement, learning strategy, and other related variables. As a consequence, beginners learners have many problems, especially in oral communication. According also to some experts, when they try to express themselves orally, they only pronounce isolate words and disconnected sentences, making their production poor and meaningless. So, in this research, the researchers, of course, is trying to contribute to the educational field, since it will analyze the strategies that are appropriate to develop the speaking skills in beginner students, which will help teachers to be aware of their students' learning process, as well as the students, of course, to improve it in a natural manner. On the other hand, there are other benefits that this research brings, such as provide to the corresponding institution with greater tools, with which teachers, with teachers can, let's say, work inside the classroom, which will make them have a more up-to-date environment, as I said before, in terms of strategies that are focused on the students, that will make them grow academically. The research topic is appropriate teaching strategies that favor beginners students to develop the speaking skill in the Global Team Program at Centro Cultural Nicaragüense Norteamericano. As well, we have the research objective, which is the general, to analyze the appropriate teaching strategies that help beginner students to develop the speaking skill in the Global Team Program at Centro Cultural Nicaragüense Norteamericano. And the specific, number 1, to name the strategies teachers currently use to help beginner students develop their speaking skill. Number 2, identify the pros and cons students face when the teachers use the current strategies in class. Number 3, analyze the strategy that bring more benefits to help beginner students develop their speaking skill through a girl or boy that is participating, answering questions, or giving a positive reinforcement to the teacher. And number 4, to recognize the advantages and disadvantages of each strategy to help students to develop their speaking skill. So, in the literature review, I will summarize some of the important aspects taken into account, such as the second language acquisition theories, learning style, the teaching of speaking, and the teaching strategies in speaking. So, throughout the years, it's important to say that both teachers and learners have been witnesses of a constant and persistent problem that occurs in the majority of second language acquisition. There are many researchers that believe that first language has interference in second language acquisition. Also, some authors, such as Fatemi, researched about the differences in consonants when expressing them by oral, and they point out that structure of first and second language are different, which makes students find difficult to pronounce in L2 because they face two unfamiliar phonological rules. This problem often becomes a mess for teachers and frustration for learners, because it takes into account many aspects that influence the development of main parts of the language, let's say especially with speaking skill. On the other hand, it becomes a problem when teachers demand students not to use the L1, even though there is no research to support the requirement for L2 use 100% of the time. This is because for students, especially beginners, can be frustrated due to they have listened or understood a phrase in just a few occasions in L2. Consequently, since this research, tries to analyze the appropriate teaching strategies that favor beginners students to develop their speaking skill. The word strategy in class become useful because when talking about strategy, it is important to take into account that according to Miller, a strategy is a set of plans or decisions made in an effort to help organizations or in this case teachers achieve their objective. Therefore, in order to reach this aim, some theories will be taken into account into consideration for this literature review. So first, I will talk about some theories based on second language acquisition, and I will move to learning styles. In addition, I'm going to analyze what speaking is, teaching or speaking, and also what a strategy is in education and teaching strategy for speaking skill. Talking about the second language acquisition, I would like to define that the Collins Dictionary defines the second language acquisition as the language that a person learns after his or her native language, which in other words, let's say that the second language acquisition is a research composed of a set of theories that explain that the human capacity to learn to explain what the capacity how a human learn a language. There are many theories that demonstrate that people learn a new language in different ways, including teenagers, since the moment that things do not happen innately as it happens when people learn their native language. For that reason, some theories were chosen, such as learning and acquired theory. This theory is from Krashen, which makes a very nice distinction between acquisition and learning, and also expresses that teenagers have two distinct and independent ways of developing competence in second language. One is related to a similar way in how children develop their first language, which is subconsciously. This is the acquisition that results from that subconscious process influencing. And the second one is that learning, which is basically related to a conscious process of getting knowledge of a second language that involves, for example, knowing the rules, being aware of them, and practicing structure. Even when a part of the theory is related to acquire a language as a baby does not mean that teenagers could do it in their second language. For instance, when implementing some teaching strategies, it is necessary to have clear ideas about the differences between acquisition and learning of a second language in order to look for appropriate teaching strategies that favor beginner students to develop the speaking skill. Another theory is the creative construction theory, which sometimes refers to as the naturalistic approach, which deals with the idea that people are, let's say, born with a specific and special language system that they use to acquire a language. The same author mentions that there are like three elements that are internally involved in second language acquisition. Those elements from Krashen's book include a filter, an organizer, and a monitor. The author says that the filter involves a social context in which the learner is influenced based on the reactions of various social environments. The organizer is the one who arranged the students' language systems, as Krashen mentions, he's the one who determines the arrangements of the usage of incorrect grammatical construction as provisional precursors of grammatical structure, the systematically occurrence of errors in the learned utterance, as well as a common order in which structures are learned. And finally, this is a conscious learning process in which learners attempt to figure out rules, and are generally aware of their own process. The monitor is in charge of editing and making alterations or corrections as they are consciously perceived. Krashen believes that fluency in second language performance is due to what we have acquired, not what we have learned, which is interesting. Adolescents, sorry, and adults should do as much acquiring as possible for the purpose of achieving communicative fluency. Therefore, the monitor should have only a minor role in the process of gaining communicative competence by having enough time for this and focusing on form and not on meaning. For that, for this reason, or for instance, this research can take into consideration, the theory in which learners can learn to develop the speaking skill by nature. Also, we have the sociocultural theory, which is based on Vygotsky's ideas, which state that the process of the development of children as being very strongly determined by society and culture. This is why he believes that every function in the child's cultural development appears twice, first on the social level and later on the individual level. Moreover, this applies equally to voluntary attention, to logical memory, and to the formation of concepts. This theory focuses not only on how adults influence the cognitive learning process of children, but how culture impacts the way they learn. This is due to the fact that culture provides children with tools of intellectual adaptation, which of course allows children to adapt the way they learn. Vygotsky also points out the important role social interaction play in the learning process of children. In this theory, he mentions an important concept which states that the cognitive development is limited by a zone of proximal development, which of course points out the importance of guided learning, which differences what the students can do with and without help. And finally, we have the communicative language teaching, which is a language competence. It means that the knowledge and ability to use the target language. This theory I consider is important to include in this research because it is essential to incorporate techniques that push the students to communicate in the target language. For instance, for that reason, the students need to know how to communicate using the language in a meaningful way, and they have to be motivated and aware of the impact and importance of learning the language, especially the speaking skill. Now, moving to the learning styles, according to one author, Stenberg, a learning style is not in itself an ability, but rather a preferred way of using one's ability. We have to be clear that people have different learning styles, and for that reason, each person experiences the world in unique ways, including the ways they learn best. Once teachers understand the differences in this type of learning styles, they can have a big impact in the way they handle their students, set up groups, projects, and rally behind individual learning. For this, the Neil Fleming's VARK, the VARK model, is one of the most popular representations, and in this model, the most of the time is referred to as VARK learning styles, where students can identify by whether they have preferences for visual, auditory, reading and writing, or kinesthetic learning. If we talk about visual learners, these styles mean that learners learn by seeing. Learners possess a high ability. A high ability for visual recall. They prefer to learn using visual representations such as pictures, movies, diagrams, posters, graphs, because they would rather see information presented in visual rather than in written form. Then we have the auditory learners, which learn by listening, of course. Learners prefer in this style our audio, and they possess a high ability for auditory recall. They prefer repetition, music, debates, lectures, and summaries. And this type of learners have the tendency to use like an eye and head movements when gathering or memorizing information. Then we have the reading and writing learners, which prefers to take into information displayed as words. This means they rely heavily on the written word. They prefer making lists, reading books, taking notes. This is most used by traditional educators, and this type of learner prefer to have a book as a way to get and share information. And finally, we have the kinesthetic learners, which they like to learn by touching and doing. They heavily depend on interactions with the learning environment around them, especially with their bodies. They prefer movements, experiments, hands-on activities, manipulating objects, and touch. And it's interesting because they will easily remember events or information where a physical event was involved. Now, moving a little bit to the teaching of speaking, we can say that according to Brown, speaking is an interactive process of constructing meaning that involves producing, receiving, and processing information. Of course, in other words, let's say this is a action of making vocal sounds in order to express thoughts or feelings in spoken language. English has been considered the most influential medium in connecting the global communication. So a big amount of people in the world really study English hard in order to communicate with native speakers or speakers of other languages. When learning a new language, it's necessary to take into consideration the skills of reading, writing, listening, and speaking. However, between these four skills, the speaking skill is considered like the most direct way to express and talk to people. And for that reason, students use the language more frequently only inside the class and less frequent outside the class. This means that learners have a limited period of time to learn English in the classroom, and they don't have enough motivation to continue practicing it in other areas. This becomes a big problem that makes students to have difficulties to communicate in English. There are many difficulties also in learning the speaking skill. One reason can be the influence of the environment that doesn't support students to speak the language frequently, such as the people that are outside the classroom, which can be people from other groups, parents, and even the environment itself, because once they are outside, they stop speaking English. So, for example, some students don't want to feel themselves rejected for those people around them, so they prefer to use their native language in their daily conversation. Other reasons, maybe maybe they have problems with grammar because of different forms and structures that learners have to distinguish and memorize. It might them feel like embarrassed when they speak because of their weakness in grammar. So, and also, some factors that are related to learning themselves, teaching strategies, the curriculum, the environments, and also sometimes or in somehow the pronunciation, the use of L1, students' behavior and motivation are the main difficulties. So now we have the teaching strategies in speaking, which says that according to Armstrong, one author, the teaching strategy refers to methods used to help students learn the desired course contents and be able to develop achievable goals in the future. Which, of course, in other words, means that teaching strategies are like extensive plans of actions in order to achieve a particular goal. A plan could involve aspects such as contents, teaching, objectives, tasks, etc. And teachers should know that in a classroom there are students from different backgrounds, capacities, abilities, and needs. Therefore, being an effective teacher requires some elements such as the use of creative, new and innovative teaching strategies in order to meet students' needs, wants, and lacks. On the other hand, when considering the type of strategies, it was nice to find an article by Diaz Barriga, which advises that teachers should take into account some types of teaching strategy at the beginning. For example, is the pre-instructional, which refers to the intended to generate expectations in students about the new learnings that will be developed and active the relevant previous learnings, so that they are prepared and alert about what and how they will learn. Then we have the during, which refers to the co-instructional strategy that support the development of competencies by students during the learning teaching process itself. And of course, this help to improve their care, to make it easier for them to identify the main information, and of course to improve the understanding of the content. And finally, we have the end, which is the post-instructional, which is when a particular let's say when a particular how can I say learning unit, activity, or class has been completed, and seek that the students consolidate a critical vision of learning situation experience. One of the biggest problems with beginners is that they don't have motivation and confidence when they speak due to they are not familiar with the language yet. They hesitate to answer any question or take self-initiative when needed to participate in class activities. They are quiet and passive all the time because of a natural behavior in which teachers have to work with them to take it out of the classroom, that shyness. Moreover, because of the fact that they are beginners, they don't have like a rich vocabulary. So for instance, they might not be able to come up with ideas. On the other hand, in many researches, speaking skill has been shown to be influenced by their exposure to the target language. So having this idea in mind, teachers should implement activities that will be creative, unique, funny, and motivated for the students. Yes, because that will make them feel like engaged in learning, in the learning process. I would like to talk about the working in groups to develop the speaking skill in adolescents beginners, because we have to remember that humans are social beings who are in continuous communication and interaction with each other. For that reason, it is important to foster situations in which learners can face a real communication in a foreign language, because the importance of real interaction gives the learners the opportunity to let's say to demonstrate what they can do in the foreign language. So interaction is the basis of human communication, and all elements of communicative and interactive competence like grammar, discourse, social linguistic, pragmatics, all of them are involved in human interaction. So for that reason, the teaching strategies are in somehow based on interaction in order to develop the speaking skills, such as the information gap activities, which is the main purpose. The main purpose of this activity is to use the target language to speak in order to share information with others and find information from others. One author, Aim, believes that the information gap activity is useful when the data and models are highly uncertain. During this activity, for sure, beginners are exposed to speak using their knowledge to complete the task or activity. We have the role plays. I will briefly mention some aspects, because later I will talk a little bit more about this kind of strategies in the effectiveness, so I will just mention it quickly. So we have the role plays as a second one, which is another way of promoting speaking, and it allows the learners to be part of very social contexts and pretend to have a variety of social roles. This activity can be implemented as a strategy in which can be worked in pairs or small group of students. We have the creative task activity, which is based on the use of this will help the student to improve the creativity and thinking. It also achieves much of its success because it helps students to be involved, engaged, and push them to be empowered through a bottom-up versus top-down educational process. Another one is are the games. Because students need motivation and movement in the class, and through games they can find more attractive the way they learn. There are many games in which speaking can be used in order to practice fluency. So games involve competitions, miming, guessing, board games, etc. Then we have the story and retelling, which can be implemented as a strategy too at any level to improve fluency in speaking. This will give to the students the chance to practice longer stretches of this course. And finally, the interview, which can be useful, including more motivation, especially if the topics involve like personal experience or let's say opinion sharing, because it engages the students to interact with things that interest them. Interviews can be easily integrated with a specific outline, such as providing to learners some questions where they can choose from to interview others. Yes, that's it. Then we have the methodology. So to guide this research, the study was based on quantitative and qualitative sources. So this because qualitative research is characterized by its aims, which relate to understanding some aspect of social life, and its method, which generate words rather than numbers, as a data analysis, of course. And unlike the quantitative research, which focuses mainly on statistics. For instance, this is a mixed research, but more focused on the qualitative part. The participants, okay, we have for the participant we have the student from Global Team Program who are enrolled from level 1 to 3, which are the level for beginners. Also the teacher who are teaching these courses, these levels of beginners, and the coordinator of the Language Institute, which make a sum of participants of 32. The participants are the Language Institute, Carlos Miranda, from Centro Cultural Nicaragüense Norteamericano. Then we have the beginners students, beginners from Global Team Program at Centro Cultural Nicaragüense Norteamericano, and there are from the 3 beginners level 1, 2, and 3. There are around 50 students enrolled in this course, where 25 students were taken as a sample. Also, we have the teachers, which is a group number of 5 participants, which of course teach beginners courses in the Global Team Program at Centro Cultural Nicaragüense Norteamericano. The instruments used for this, first there was a questionnaire for the teachers in order to obtain relevant information about the implementation of strategies to help learners to develop the speaking skills. And also it will help the research to analyze the appropriate teaching strategy that will favor the beginners. Also, we have the interview to the language coordinator in order to let's say to find out the use of the appropriate teaching strategy and the benefits and constraints of it for beginners students, in order to discuss what it means for them to develop the speaking skill through this. Then we have a survey. It was for the student from Global Team Program, and because in order to have like a deep view on the student's experience and asking them for the learning process and preferences related to the speaking skill. And finally, we have a observation class in order to have like a real scenario to see how strategies were implemented. So now we have the findings. There were a lot of findings, but I would like to talk about the most interesting aspects and more relevant aspects. So we have first about the teaching strategies that are like the most effective to develop the speaking skills. So we have first the interviews. We have to say that I have to say that an interview can be an effective strategy in obtaining information, motivating the students to speak, making the student feel confident to express their ideas in English, giving the opportunity to the student to demonstrate that they communicate freely in English. By this strategy, students can improve their conversations by asking, giving, agreeing or disagreeing opinions, information, or feelings. Using interviews as a strategy allow the students to have like the responsibility for making a approach to his or her informant and bringing back the information in a form that can be used for a class discussion. So this removes the passive element from the student's involvement and sends him or send her actively into confrontation with the subject matter. Let's say what else. I think that the objective of the interview is to know information about a specific topic so that the class may have the opportunity of responding to this information. Also, students can express that the interview encourage them to speak English more than their teacher, because in this case teacher is only a guide to make a conversation run smoothly. Yes, okay, so then we have the effectiveness of videos, because they maintain developing English language competency, particularly speaking skill, as a result of listening comprehension. During the second language acquisition and foreign language learning, the input should be comprehensible, interesting, and relevant, but not strictly graded in order to not to terrify, terrify the learners. So regarding those significant features of language inputs, using videos is one of the effective ways of developing communication strategies and engaging beginners students to speaking classes to improve the oral skills. Since, let's say, also there is always learner diversity in this classroom, the students have their own background information, unique interests, and different ways of learning. Additionally, I can say that videos provide opportunity to the learner to hear native speakers in everyday conversational situation, which directly linked it to real life speaking input. During the interviews, students also let's say that having videos in class, during the videos, also they have like different visual dimensions which decrease the ambiguities present of the native speakers' voices. So these visuals and oral competencies motivate students to practice the language learner. Then we have the use of role plays to help students to develop the speaking skill, because role plays give the students an opportunity to practice communicating in different social contexts and in different social roles, so it can improve students' oral performance. It also allows students to be creative and to put themselves in another person's place for a while. And also, roleplay as a strategy makes students work in pairs, support one another, and make the class more interesting in order to reduce students' boredom. Moreover, role plays give students different possibilities for communication and practice. Also, I would like to talk about other findings that were like really clear and shown in the results of the applied instruments, which are based on the how the let's say the strategy that are currently implemented in class make them feel in somehow. So talking about limitation or difficulties, so we have first the shyness, which involves many factors, because shyness is an emotion that affects how a person feels and behaves around others. So shyness can mean feeling uncomfortable, self-conscious, nervous, bashful, timid, or insecure. So people who feel shy sometimes notice physical sensations like blushing or feeling speechless, shaky, or breathless. So for the reason when people feel shy, they might hesitate to say or do something because they are feeling unsure of themselves and they are not ready to be noticed, let's say like that. So shy people feel shyer when they are not sure how to act, don't know how others will react, or when attention is on them. And this is what happened in the majority of the cases with beginners when developing the speaking skills. Uh, the other aspect is about the vocabulary, because I think that vocabulary is also an essential skill for learning to read, speak, write, and listen. O sea, sorry, it's like very important. I mean, in the four skills. So without sufficient vocabulary, people cannot communicate and express their feeling both in form of spoken and written effectively. So the more people master vocabulary, the more they can speak, write, read, and listen as they want. So let's say that when confronted with a native English speaker, when watching a movie without subtitle, or when listening to a favorite English song, when reading a text, or when writing a letter to a friend, I think that students will always need to operate with words. Indeed, people need to use words in order to express themselves in any language, especially when speaking. So, uh, let's say that other students in somehow are confronted with the problem of forgetting the words immediately after the teacher have elicited their meaning, or after they have looked them in the dictionary. And this is also a cause of the lack of vocabulary. The more words students learn, the easier they internalize them. So which means that in this case vocabulary are not like is not sorry too much implemented. Another aspect is the motivation, because some teachers face problems with the lack of motivation of students in the learning process of English, and teachers try to look for help to increase the motivation in the class. So this is because nowadays in Nicaragua, the American Embassy is offering some different platforms in which they are offering tools to prepare teachers with different workshops, making relevant the topic of motivation within them. So let's say that I think that the most important tool in the classroom is the motivation for being interested in the topic, because when students feel bored, they don't really care to the teacher's explanation, or they don't pay attention to the class, neither participate in the activity to increase their knowledge. Motivation is a concept without physical reality. We cannot see motivation. We see effort, interest, attitude, desire. but we cannot see it in like a something showed. So for speaking, it is more important first to give competence and then performance. Motivation is also, let's say, a kind of social factors, such as teachers and family members may affect the motivation of students to speak English, but the most influencing reason is the students' desire to speak the English. And finally, we have the interactions that has been considered as an important strategy in the field of second language acquisition, since it needs at least the involvement of two people who collaborate in a face-to-face interaction, because when using a language in real communication, we need another person to have it in front. So interaction involves responding to other people, taking turns in a conversation, encouraging people to speak, expressing interest, changing the topic, asking people to repeat or explain what they say, and so on. So in order to facilitate communication among them, interaction in the classroom need to be implemented in order to give the students opportunity to get feedback from the teacher or other students that leads to improve their language system. Also, when learners talk to each other in the classroom, they practice the target language. This means that talking in the classroom is considered as a learning strategy that the students use during the classroom interaction. On the other hand, there are some aspects in interaction that involve the formal and informal interaction. So, for me, this means that all that is related with assessment in class, like, is a how can I explain? Let's say that having interaction in the class is a way that we can also assess our students to see how good they are when interacting, when communicating when speaking with others. Now I'm going to talk about the conclusion, which in somehow can I say that that English language learning is need to be teaching effectively and professionally, but to overcome some of these beginners, some of the things that beginners face when learning the language, teachers have to make the classroom instruction strong and dynamic. So for that reason, the use of teaching strategy in the classroom are discussed comprehensively. Due to the teaching strategy is a process of instructions used by the teachers to help students to learn and to apply their knowledge to achieve their academic goals. For that reason, this research focused on the appropriate teaching strategy to develop the speaking skill in beginners, adolescents, in students among the learners in the EFL classroom environment. I could say that the objective of this research were really achieved because the strategy were analyzed. They were also named the ones that were currently used. They were also seen in a way that we have the advantages and disadvantages of them. So we can conclude that beginners, adolescents, learners, they are always expected to learn new ideas from different teachers, each with a different styles of teaching and set of expectations. So teenagers, they are looking for a greater independence. So sometimes they are characterized by having a high achievement when challenging and engaged. So they also prefer active over passive learning experience, and in somehow they are interested in interacting with peers during learning activities. For that reason, of course, having the different teaching strategies involve all previously mentioned by adapting it to make it effective into taking into account based on those characteristics. Also, the principles that that characterize the most effective strategy involve the offering of clear and complementary instruction with visuals or nonverbal elements, and also let's say that the presenting of the objective, or maybe the organization of collaborative work through strategy, and so on. So for the reason all the strategies analyzed in this research are effective for the students and appropriate to the beginners students when adapting them. Classroom interaction must be encouraged because it is useful strategy to enhance learners' communicative competence, since it plays a significant role in learning English as a foreign language by giving enough opportunity to learners to be able to communicate with others. And also having teaching strategies in class for developing the speaking skill can be meaningful and respectful, can have meaningful and respectful relationship between students and teacher, as well as students and students. If teachers are going to truly inspire and motivate all of the students, teachers should know each of them on a personal level by knowing their interests and hobbies. So in that way, teacher can find different strategies to implement in class. And also, we can say that the use of technology nowadays as a strategy can help students to develop the speaking skill, because due to many consider, let's say, those resources as a way to let students talk with some topic or speak with people from other countries that maybe they have the possibility to speak the language. So I consider that this research expects that the attempt will benefit, guide, and stimulate research on the EFL oral skill development. And finally, as the recommendation, I can say that a teacher needs to focus on the teaching vocabulary, because there has been a little bit done with the vocabulary knowledge to develop the speaking skills. Also, teachers should motivate their learners to participate in classroom activities by using different strategies. Also, the institution should provide training to the teachers to develop some skills based on working with beginners students, because in that way teacher will know how to deal with them and how to act with different reactions from the students. And finally, institutions should provide the teachers more resources about the use of technology in class. Due to we are living in a world full of it can help even better to the students' learning process. So thank you so much, Professor, for listening to me. I really apologize for the time, but I think that I had a important points to talk about. So I hope you really like my presentation, and I am getting ready for any feedback that you can give me. So thank you for everything, for your help. So that's it. Here I have the references in case that you want to see it. Thank you.